National languages and language planning. National languages are commonly considered a symbol of a national unity, as its functions are to identify the nation and unite its people. Therefore, we can define a national language as a language that identifies and unites a political, cultural, and social unit of a country. Frequently, the government declares a specific language as its national language for political purposes. Identifying an official language may also be necessary when the choice of national language is problematic. For example, Paraguay is the only Latin American nation with a national language. The Paraguayan government declared Guarani, an indigenous language spoken by 90% of its population, as a national language and Spanish as the official language in 1960. This changed in 1992, taking into consideration the social linguistic concepts and activists' hard work. Guarani is now both a national and official language, and Spanish remains as official language also. Reasons of being an official language: history, value as a world language, and international lingua franca. The official status is often shared with indigenous languages. And speaking of official status, English is well known to be spoken in England, USA, and New Zealand, but surprisingly, it isn't legally an official language of these countries. It hasn't been considered necessary to legislate that the language of the majority is an official language. In New Zealand, for example, English is de facto official language in government and educational issues, but Maori and New Zealand Sign Language have legal or de jure status as an official language. Minority groups of activists have taken radical action for their language's official recognition. Some have achieved, while others have failed. Maori language would prefer to have an official status, but it's expensive as it must provide services, information, legal representation, and education. One nation, one language is a popular slogan worldwide to represent unity. Although majority of people speak a language, this factor has no influence in the decision of it being an official language. Political power does. Some countries, such as India and African countries, avoid choosing only one language as a national language to prevent riots and even war. Language planning is deliberate language change. Here are the four interrelated steps. Selection, choose a code. Codification involves corpus planning, elaboration, developing resources, and securing its acceptance by involving status planning. Selection and acceptance involve social and political factors like being accepted by politicians and socially prestigious people, whereas these last two involve linguistic processes like producing a dictionary. Language academies and linguists have had an impact and influence on language planning. They focus on specific language problems. Nowadays, they work on including minority and endangered languages. Orthography is the process of arranging a set of spelling rules and principles of a language. Its main purpose is to represent language sounds by using letters or symbols. Governments frequently participate in this process, but in the past, missionaries were the main influence. Developing vocabulary is necessary in order to be used in all or most domains, so people can use it for different functions. There are many options involved. The first one is for the language to remain true, to borrow, adapt a word, and coining words. Coining a word involves using native resources in a modern object. People have to accept and use the linguistic forms designed. This will determine the success or failure of the language. Acquisition planning is also known as language and education planning. Other than using corpus and status planning, linguists must increase the number of users of the target language for it to be acquired. And here is where education plays a main role in this process. As in education, the learners acquire the simplest part of the language up to a more structured and complex language. Language planners generally focus on specific language problems. This chapter gave examples of those problems and how they were resolved by language planners. This reading did not expose an individual's language, rather, a nation's language. Language gives identity and belonging to a group or nation in this case.